My name is Kelly. I'm 29 and work as a civil servant. My younger brother, Steve, is 22 and recently graduated from university. He loves to boast about how his company is more prestigious than the rural city office where I work. Must be Dad's genes, right? He often jokes, reminding me of our father's career at a major corporation. Steve is the biological child of both our mother and her second husband, our father. I, however, am the child of my mother and her first husband. Despite this, our father never treated me any differently, raising me with love and care after my biological father abandoned us when I was little. To me, the man who stepped in to parent me is my real dad. When we were kids, Steve never mentioned our different parentage. But everything changed when I was 19 and he was still in middle school. Our mother died in a car accident. Devastated and unable to process his grief, Steve directed his anger at me. At the funeral, he screamed through his tears, "Why did Mom have to die? It should have been you. No one would care if the step-sibling were gone." His words shattered me. I wanted to defend myself, but before I could, our father, who was usually calm, roared at him with uncharacteristic fury. I stayed silent, but the damage was done. From that moment, my affection for Steve crumbled. After our mother's death, my relationship with Steve continued to spiral downward. Initially, he tried to compete with me academically but fell short of his ambitions, failing to get into his first-choice schools for both high school and university. As I became a full-time employee, Steve remained a part-time worker, unable to out-earn me. He could have excelled in sports or the arts, but fear of failure stopped him from trying. Instead, he latched onto the one thing he believed gave him superiority: bloodlines. He started to mock me relentlessly, claiming that as the real child of our father, he had a higher standing than me. At first, I thought it was misplaced grief, but as he grew older, his belief solidified. He began to treat me as if I were an outsider in our own family. Exhausted by his provocations, I distanced myself. When Steve decided to commute to university from home, I moved out and got my own apartment. Visits to our family home were carefully coordinated with Dad to avoid running into Steve. 4 years later, Steve graduated and landed a job at a local company with a solid reputation. I had even bought him a tie as a graduation gift. But when we spoke, his familiar arrogance resurfaced. "Of course, I got a job at a much better place than the city office you work at," he bragged. "It's in my blood after all." I decided against giving him the gift. Not long after, our father suddenly fell ill and passed away. The news was devastating. I had spoken to him the night before, and everything had seemed normal. His passing was so sudden that I didn't even get to say goodbye. At the funeral, I served as the chief mourner. Dad had left detailed arrangements, which made everything seamless, except for one thing: the inheritance. I knew this would lead to conflict. When the day came to discuss Dad's estate, Steve arrived late, over 30 minutes, and didn't bother to apologize. As soon as he sat down, he delivered his declaration. "The inheritance? Well, I'm the real child, so I'll take it all," he said with a smirk. "You're just a stepchild. Isn't it greedy for an outsider to claim what isn't theirs?" He laughed, continuing to go on about being Dad's real child, as if that somehow justified monopolizing everything. I was so exhausted from dealing with Steve all my life that I decided to end things once and for all. At the meeting about the inheritance, I put forward a condition. "I'll renounce my claim to Dad's inheritance," I said firmly. "In return, you must never contact me for the rest of your life, no matter what." Steve leaned back in his chair, smirking. "Are you stupid? Like I ever want to contact you. Don't expect anything from me later. Just disappear." His smugness was infuriating, but I refused to let it show. Instead, I stood up disgusted. As I walked away, I couldn't help but remember how sweet and innocent Steve had been as a child, a sharp contrast to the man he'd become. The next day, I visited a lawyer to begin the legal process of renouncing my claim. "Kelly, you mentioned you don't have inheritance rights because you're a stepchild," the lawyer said, reviewing my documents. I interrupted him. "Actually, Dad officially adopted me after marrying my mother. Legally, I do have the right to inherit his property, but I've made up my mind. I don't want anything." The lawyer nodded, though he seemed puzzled. It was true that Dad had adopted me, making us parent and child in every sense except biology. I knew the full extent of Dad's estate from the legal investigations. but I wanted freedom from the complications of being labeled a stepchild or a legitimate child. I just wanted to leave it all behind. A month later, the lawyer informed me that the court had finalized my renunciation. With a mix of relief and dread, I called Steve to let him know. "It's done," I said. "I've renounced my claim to the inheritance. By the way, Shut up." Steve cut me off, yelling, "I get it. Stop acting like you're my real sister. Don't contact me again." The line went dead before I could say anything else. I sighed, knowing that Steve's arrogance would only lead him to trouble. 3 months later, my phone started buzzing with calls and emails from Steve. I ignored them at first, but his persistence wore me down. Reluctantly, I answered one of his calls. "Kelly," he said, his voice strained. I need to borrow some money." "What?" I asked, taken aback. "Dad had debts, big ones. I've already used up his savings, but it's not enough. I can't keep up with the repayments." I frowned. "That doesn't make sense. Dad's debts weren't unmanageable. What happened to all the savings?" Steve snapped. "Did you know about this? Did you push the debt onto me? You're just jealous of me, the legitimate child." I laughed bitterly. "Jealous? Of what? You're the one who hung up on me when I tried to explain Dad's financial situation. You blocked my calls and ignored me until now when you need something." The truth was, I had learned about Dad's debts during the renunciation process. While they were significant, they were manageable with careful planning. Steve's poor decisions had made things worse, but he refused to take responsibility. "You're not my sister anyway," I said. "Go talk to the mortgage lender or the lawyer. I'm just an outsider, remember." "Don't sweat the small stuff," he replied, his voice dripping with entitlement. "I'm treating you like a sister even though you're just a stepchild. Be happy about it. Now come on, Kelly, give me some money." Anger surged through me. I hung up, blocked his number, and even got a new phone to avoid his harassment. But Steve didn't stop. One day, he started showing up at my workplace. Gone was the smug arrogance. He now looked genuinely distressed. He would visit during lunch breaks, sneaking out from his job. On days he didn't come, he called incessantly, disrupting my work. I explained the situation to my boss, who moved me to a different position, but Steve found ways around it. He began waiting for me after hours, lingering outside the office until I left. One evening, I found him in the parking lot. Furious, I marched up to him. "Stop it already," I snapped. "Don't cause trouble here." At work, Steve confronted me again. "I told you to consult the loan institutions and the lawyer," I said, exasperated. He dropped his pretense of politeness, crossing his arms with anger simmering in his voice. "I already did. The group credit life insurance means I don't have to pay for the house anymore. As for the car, there's $5,000 left, but I negotiated to lower the monthly repayments and keep it. So yeah, I handled it." "Then you're not struggling to live," I replied sharply. "Dad only had those 2 loans. What are you begging me for money for?" Steve's demeanor changed. His anger softened, and he looked around nervously. Finally, he began to speak, though reluctantly. "Actually, Dad had quite a bit of savings," he admitted. "I spent it on things, but I went over budget. Then I borrowed money from a friend, but now I can't pay it back. That guy's been going around saying I scammed him. Now I can't borrow from anyone else. If I can't get money from friends, I'll have to go to predatory lenders. Then I'll have to repay those loans with even more borrowed money. I can't make ends meet." His explanation was convoluted, but the core of the problem was clear. He was stuck in a cycle of debt. "So you're borrowing money to repay other debts, and now you've run out of options," I said, summarizing. "Yeah, that's it," Steve said with a hint of desperation. Then he held out his hand toward me. "If you pay, it'll all be over. So Kelly, give me $88,000. I slapped his hand away, glaring at him. "There's no way I'm paying," I snapped. "This is entirely your fault for overspending and then resorting to loan sharks." Steve glared back at me, rubbing his hand. "Why can't you help me out when I'm asking nicely? Is it because we're only half-blood related? You stepchildren are really the worst, so unpleasant." I ignored his insult, got into my car, and started the engine. Steve grabbed at the door in desperation, but I shoved his hand away. "You promised not to contact me in exchange for monopolizing the inheritance. And yet here you are, breaking promises, begging for money, and being rude on top of it all. I don't have a single penny for you. If you come near me again, I'll call the police." "Kelly, please," he cried, but I didn't look back. I stepped on the accelerator and drove away. Despite my warning, Steve didn't stop. He began lingering at the city hall where I worked, pestering staff and calling various departments. While he didn't cause a scene, his persistence made him infamous among the employees. Reporting him was difficult because his behavior, though disruptive, wasn't overtly threatening. To escape his harassment, I took action. "Kelly doesn't work here anymore," a staff member told him one day. "What, she quit?" Steve exclaimed, frantic. "How much severance pay did she get?" His desperation grew as he realized he couldn't track me down. With personal information like addresses and contact details strictly protected, there was no way for him to find out where I'd gone. Unable to gather the money he owed by the repayment deadline, Steve fell deeper into debt. Eventually, he faced wage garnishment and was forced to live modestly. The arrogant brother who used to strut around was gone, replaced by someone humbled by his own mistakes. As for me, I hadn't actually quit my job. The city where I worked had been formed by merging several smaller towns, and the old town hall buildings now function as branch offices. I'd explained the situation to the personnel department and requested a transfer. They assigned me to a remote branch in the mountains, far from Steve's reach. Initially, I planned to return to my former department once the issue was resolved. But over time, I grew to love the work in the mountain branch. With fewer residents and a constant need for staff, I felt more connected and useful to the community. The kindness of the residents here softened the sadness of losing both my parents. I still carried that grief with me, but at least I was free from the complications of being labeled a legitimate or stepchild and from the burdens of a toxic family dynamic.